Greetings to one and all. Welcome to the 12th Global Accessibility Awareness Day 2023, another year of spreading accessibility awareness to make this world inclusive. Let's kick off the panel discussion on designing for everyone, navigating the complexities of digital accessibility with our most valued panelists. To begin the proceedings, let's get a sneak peek into each panelist's bio to understand their line of expertise and accomplishments. We have Tim Reeder, the founder, owner of Blazon Interactive Group, as the moderator. Blazon Interactive Group is a marketing and IT services consulting firm based in Philadelphia. By connecting businesses with verified top-tier agency partners, Blazon helps its clients to save time and money by reducing procurement risks. Tim has dedicated more than 23 years to generating and expanding online revenue. Now, Tim looks up to top digital solution providers and organizations and links them with CMOs and CIOs in dire need of their services. Tim brings the utmost integrity and an unshakable dedication to the development of a company, serving as a conduit to the best of the best in the MarTech industry. We are honored to have him in our midst. Followed by Joann DiGennaro. Now, Joann DiGennaro is the SVP of Business Solutions and partner at Engine Room. She has over 15 years of experience as a strategic business consultant and has led teams that have won awards for their effort in online and digital media delivery. A consummate problem solver and a collaborator, she helps her clients achieve their marketing goals with high-performing and secure technology solutions. Engine Room designs, builds, and safeguards digital marketing solutions, and they are a team of seasoned technologists who target customer service excellence and support for clients. They specialize in website performance, including information security, accessibility, and scalability. We are thrilled to have her as one of our panelists. And then we have Abhik Biswas. Now, Abhik Biswas is a seasoned digital executive, business leader, and a technology strategist with over 30 years of experience in strategic planning, product management, IT strategy, marketing, team building, and leadership. He's passionate about social ventures and leveraging technology to address social issues. He's also known for building highly motivated teams and networks and identifying opportunities for accelerated growth. He's also the founder of Prakat Solutions and Eagle Genius Foundation.
Welcome to our panel discussion. My name is Tim Reeder, and I am the owner and founder of Blazon Interactive Group, a marketing and IT services consulting company based out of Philadelphia. Today's topic is designing for everyone, navigating the complexities of digital accessibility. 1 out of 7, which is over 1 billion individuals, has some sort of disability. Thus, in today's digital age, it is crucial that websites and online services are accessible to people with different types of disabilities. This not only ensures that everyone can access information and services online, but also promotes inclusivity and diversity in our society. Our panel of experts will share their insights on the challenges and opportunities of designing accessible websites, as well as best practices for integrating accessibility into the design process. We will also explore the latest trends and technologies in digital accessibility and discuss how we can create a more inclusive and accessible digital world for everyone. So without further ado, let's welcome our panelists and start the discussion. Today, we have Joann and Abhik as our subject matter experts, and I'd love to let both of you introduce yourselves, if you would, please. Joann?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joann DiGennaro. I manage business solutions for Engine Room Technology. Engine Room is a marketing and technology firm, and we design, build, and secure digital marketing solutions for our clients. I'll pass it over to Abhik.
Thanks, Joann. I'm Abhik Biswas. I'm a co-founder and the CTO of Prakat Solutions. We are based out of San Diego and Bangalore in India. And I've been passionate about accessibility for a long time, and we have about 150 engineers who are aware of accessibility in everything which they build along the process. Over to you, Tim, to take on.
Thank you, Abhik. Thank you, Abhik. I appreciate that. And thank you, Joann. So let's get into a couple of our topics today. I'd like to start with you, Joann, if I may. Why should companies and organizations care about digital accessibility?
It's a good question, Tim. So, like you were saying, like there are billions of people around the world who are using the internet, and more people are spending time online than ever. So whether you're a for-profit business or you're a nonprofit or you're a government organization, we're all in the business of serving up digital experiences. And like you said, 1 in 7, over 1 billion people worldwide are living with some form of disability. So they deserve to have equitable access to, both these physical and digital spaces. So if, as organizations, ensuring accessibility helps to foster that culture, of diversity and inclusion, specifically for people with disabilities. It helps to extend the reach of your goods and services. So there can be a really positive impact on your organizational success, but also on your business's bottom line. In general, websites that are easy to use and have higher engagement are ensuring digital accessibility helps to benefit everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Abhik, do you have anything to add on that topic, sir?
Yeah, a note on it is accessibility is one such thing which probably each one of us will experience sometime in our lives. It's not only those billion people who have some sort of a disability. We go through temporary disabilities through our lives. Let's say we break a leg. We have a physical disability for some time. At some point of time, let's say our eyes go weak. We need some sort of a tool to help us see better. So that's a disability. And a lot of times, let's say we are in a room and the lights go out. You get an experience of that kind of a disability. So I think it's something which is fairly easy for a lot of us to imagine if we think a little deeply about it. For example, if I get a phone call when I am driving, you are now using your phone in an entirely different manner from what you would be if you were not driving. So you use your voice commands, you use certain gestures, which make life easy. So a lot of these technologies were developed for people with disabilities, and now it has become mainstream for all of us. So I think thinking about people with disabilities when you're designing things can probably make life better for all the 8 billion people on the planet, not just the 1 billion we started off the discussion with.
Sure. So kind of along those lines, Abhik, what role would you say that technology can play in making the world more accessible? And what are some emerging trends in this area?
So I think technology, for some reason, over the last few years, has taken a center seat because of a lot of people having to work remote. We have started figuring out ways to get groceries without going to the store. Our lifestyle has significantly changed over the last 2-3 years. And it was quite a shock for some people who had not adopted this. We had customers who were physically providing services, and they suddenly had no way to provide that. And we got into discussions to figure out how do you solve this. And it was a challenge from the provider side of things. It was a challenge from the user side of things because we didn't have enough time to switch over. But I think after these 2-3 years, we are a lot more comfortable with using technologies. And a lot of the innovations which we are seeing in technology probably still have a room for some amount of inclusivity to be built into it. For example, I'm sure all of us have seen people with these VR sets on their heads, and it's a really amazing experience to be able to immerse yourself in an environment which is digital. But there are people who probably have visual challenges who will not appreciate it as much as the rest of the population, just because they probably have an issue with, let's say, they're colorblind, or they don't have a perception of depth. So a lot of these things which are being developed assume certain capabilities or certain sensitivities which a person has. And we don't usually accommodate people who are lacking in that. So probably, I mean, the first stage of most technology is get new technology out. And then we will go back and look at it and say, hey, are we missing out on a market, or are we missing out on some segment of the population? And then we will go back and probably refine it. And that's the reason I find today's topic extremely important for everybody in tech, because the earlier we, I think, start thinking about this, the more likely it is that we'll have a solution which is at least usable by most people.
That's a wonderful and thorough response to the question, Abhik. Thank you so much. Joann, anything to add to that?
It is interesting how much the pandemic pushed, our comfort levels, right, with technology. For myself personally, living in a more rural area, there weren't a lot of options, like Abhik mentioned, for ordering groceries and food. But then during that time, the number of options, really exploded. And that's just a small example of how really the use of technology has accelerated in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So moving along, Joann, I'm going to stay with you. The American Disabilities Act, Section 508, is a United States law that requires federal agencies and some federal contractors to make their websites accessible. And WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I'll say that again, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. With that backdrop, what's the difference between WCAG, Section 508, and ADA standards, and who needs to comply?
Yeah, there's a lot of letters in that. So both Section 508 and ADA are pieces of US legislation, right? So Section 8 specifically refers to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So this was as you said, this was a US federal law that mandates that federal agencies provide information, communications that are accessible to people with disabilities. So this includes, digital content on websites. It includes software. It includes, phone, interactions. So all of these services need to be accessible. There's also a piece of that Section 504 that specifically applies to organizations or entities that receive federal funding, right? So this may be universities, schools, hospitals. So if your organization receives federal funding or you're a federal agency, your website needs to be accessible to people with disabilities. ADA is the American with Disabilities Act, and that was passed in the 90s as a civil rights law. It's a bit broader. It applies to both the public and private sector, but that mandates access to physical spaces, employment opportunities, and digital spaces for people with disabilities. So the interpretation of that law is where it extends to websites and website content. So if your website is not accessible, you could face an ADA lawsuit. And we have seen those, happening, thousands of them every year, right? Especially in the last couple of years. So WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is a set of standards created by W3C. This is the main set of international standards for the internet. So it's a set of recommendations about how to make your website more accessible, especially for people with disabilities. The most recent version is WCAG 2.1. They're working on a 3.0. And it has different levels of conformance to the guidelines. So it varies from level A, which is a set of guidelines that you must satisfy, all the way to level AAA, which is a set of guidelines that you may or should satisfy. So WCAG is really the gold standard globally for how to deliver accessible experiences. Many companies and governments around the world reference these standards and use them as part of their legislation even.
That's great, Joann. Very educational and helpful. Thank you. Abhik, anything you'd like to add to that topic?
Just a little bit around the global impact of standards like this. If you really look at it, every country has almost adapted some sort of a legislation around this similar to the ADA. But there are subtle differences between how deep each one has gone. So you have to be a little sensitive and cautious when you're entering different markets, because the need of that market might be different from what you are used to in your local market. So for example, in Canada, every state has its own level of accessibility standards. And some of the most detailed ones come from Ontario. And that region basically probably has thought the most about accessibility from various angles. So if we have to, let's say, build a product which is used in the city of Toronto or something like that, you probably want to go and look at their local standards before you roll it out, because you never know what all details are there in that local standard, which we have probably missed in the rest of the world. So it's important to be aware of local considerations before we get in. Globally, I think 90% of everything is what WCAG recommends, but there are pieces which people put in just for something which is a local issue. For example, it could be to do with, I don't know, sometimes it is to do with the nature of the language. So we normally have things which are left to right, top to bottom, but there are languages which don't follow that. So then your accessibility becomes an issue because you are expecting certain things to be in a particular way and it shows up on the screen the opposite way. What do you do? So yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion which we have created for ourselves in the world of technology by having so many localized versions of this, but I guess it's all for a good cause.
Indeed, sir. So Abhik, staying with you, if I may, do you feel the growth of technology makes life more challenging or more manageable for a person with a disability or, say, the aging population?
A very interesting question, and I'm sure there's no right answer to this. It's very person dependent, but I did see a lot of cases in the last few years where we were working in the healthcare space in California with aged population, and all the solutions which we were trying to impose on them for, let's say, getting medical help remotely. Some of the people adapted to it very easily. And there are people who, even after 3 years, are struggling with it. So it is kind of difficult to get someone who has never used, let's say, a smartphone to this level. They probably used it only for making phone calls. Now, getting some of these people to use it for, let's say, messaging itself is a huge step. Now, let alone having a consultation with your doctor online. So that whole process of moving from no tech to tech has been a challenge for a lot of people. But then if you look at the younger generation, today, if you probably give a cell phone to a 2-year-old, a smartphone, they know exactly what to do with it. And they know it intuitively. It's not because they have been taught what to do. They just figure it out. Now, we have these extremes in the society. Also, there are regional differences where, based on how much of technology penetration has happened in that market. But I'll just give you an example of India over the last 4 or 5 years. We now have a system which allows for digital payments across the board. And it used to be that in the larger cities, people would go and pay using their phones. But if you now go down even to the smallest village in India, and you, let's say, need to pay 50 cents for a tea or a coffee, that person will accept digital payments. And most of them will not accept cash. So because there is this whole problem of giving back change. So for most of the population, this was something which was extremely useful, because otherwise there was this whole problem of handling coins and bills of various types, and figuring out how much of currency you need to have with you to be able to satisfy any customer who walks in. So this became something which was so useful to people that the adoption of it was almost instant. And every day we see billions of transactions of various sizes, starting from few cents to larger ones, which go through that system, and people have become comfortable with it. But there are still people who are not able to reconcile to the fact that I can't touch and feel money. So I think it's a journey. There will be people who will adapt to it faster. There will be people who will take a little longer, and we need to be patient with the people who will take longer. I think we'll get there eventually.
Amen. Joann, anything that you might want to add?
No, I think it is interesting to see these, to see us become a bit more of a cashless, society, and in some places, like if you go to a fast food restaurant now, There's so much pre-ordering, app ordering that the lines, there is no line, right?
Mhm.
And so, and I think in the, in the spirit of accessibility too, it's also providing those different options, those different means for different abilities and capabilities, so that, you can continue to consume goods and services like anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So one of the things that we're talking about today is inclusivity, right? And both of you have mentioned folks with disabilities and different types of disabilities. Abhik just mentioned how a young person, even a toddler like a 2-year-old, will adopt so quickly to technology. And then we're also trying to develop on the web for senior citizens as well. So, with that backdrop, Joann, how can we balance the needs of different groups of users when designing accessible websites?
Yeah, I thought Abhik had some really great examples earlier, right, about these moments where we all may experience decreased ability, right? Whether it's our eyes getting worse as we get older, or using a phone, right, while you're driving. So it really starts with awareness of those moments and of those abilities and of the related barriers that may come with it, right, when you're designing digital experiences. So if we, think about those motor functions that are needed to use a mouse or a keyboard, or if you have a hearing impairment and you can't listen to video content, or again with the low vision or being colorblind where you can't distinguish the color red from the color blue, it starts with the awareness that there are different abilities, different capabilities, and that we need to design for that more inclusive experience. So that, for your website, think about the use of color, the color of copy or text in the front and the color of the background on the web page, ensuring different interactive elements like links and buttons and web forms are clearly labeled and clear to identify. It's making sure that, there are different ways to consume a piece of content. So a video could have subtitles on it, or it could also come with a transcript. But the overarching theme is around making your website and digital content as easy to navigate and interact with as possible. And then the good news is when you incorporate these accessibility-minded features into your website, you really are improving the experience for all of your users, right? So that everyone, regardless of their abilities, can benefit from accessible design.
Absolutely. So I'd like to kind of dovetail off of that, Joann, and address a question to you, Abhik, that is certainly related. So how can we use data to help people manage their cognitive disabilities or even psychological disorders better?
Very interesting question. And I think we don't do enough in this area. And a lot of it is, I think, related to our current perceptions around things like privacy. But if you really look at it, just imagine a scenario where there is a person who is, let's say, diabetic. They are sitting at home and watching TV. They flip to a cookery channel, and the channel is showing, let's say, chocolate chip cookies being made. Now, this person is alone at home, probably it's 9:30, 10 at night. The first instinct is going to be, I want those cookies.
Yes,
And
I'm getting hungry as you speak.
and they would probably go to their kitchen and make it for themselves, now that they know how to make it. So are we doing the right thing for them? Now, supposing your TV knew that this is something which is harmful for you and filtered out programming which probably is going to trigger certain things. In this case, let's say greed, but it would probably make it easier for that person to be compliant with their doctor's instructions if this didn't happen. Now, look at it from another perspective. Let's say there is a person who is affected by some sort of a trauma related to, let's say, a gun. And you're watching a movie and there are guns which are shown on the screen. And sometimes this can trigger intense emotional trauma for somebody who's watching. Now, you've all seen how the TV channels beep when certain kinds of words are spoken. So is there a way we could kind of have a beep, kind of a video version of a beep, which kind of blocks out the content when it is coming, let's say, as a part of a movie? So you're not triggering this trauma, and this can be extremely dangerous for people who are alone. And we actually faced a lot of this during the pandemic because people were alone. They were not able to even ask for help, and they were afraid to go and go to the hospital. So best thing to do, watch TV. And a lot of the things which these kind of triggers could send people totally in a downward spiral. So I think there is a huge room for activities like this. We are doing some sort of experiments with university students at one particular university to try and measure some sort of, for the lack of a better word, let's say, happiness index. So you know when somebody is getting into a depression, or you know when somebody is getting anxious, and hopefully there is something which can be done to help them. But the first part of it is we have to be able to access the data to be able to actually make that decision. And with a lot of concerns which people are talking about today around privacy, security of data, this is my personal data versus this is public data, a lot of those things are probably coming in the way of us doing more for people who have psychological or emotional issues, which could be helped with technology.
Joann, this topic, thank you, Abhik. Absolutely. And Joann, on this topic of, how we use data to better serve these groups, do you have anything that you might want to add?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly during any kind of the testing process, right? There's this notion, it's called holistic testing, right? Which is the notion of testing with users who actually have disabilities, right? It's a fantastic way to gather insights as to what kind of website or application features may be a barrier to their experience. So, right now we're working with a client to build an application to help patients manage their symptoms based on medications that they're taking. And so we do have a set of pilot users who are taking those medications and who are using the app and providing real-time, really insightful feedback to us. And so in that sense, we're able to take, because we all, as designers and developers, we all bring our own bias, right, to how we create our work. And that bias is based on our own personal abilities and experiences. So we're taking other perspectives into the design process to to really help to, address all different types of disabilities.
Yeah, thank you. So Joann, in the last two responses, one from you and one from Abhik, you've both referenced projects and work that you're doing with certain clients right now at your organizations. And to dovetail off of that, I just wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges that designers and developers face when it comes to digital accessibility, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say one of the biggest challenges, most expensive, is really thinking about digital accessibility too late in the project, right? So once your website or your application is built, and then you're conducting, let's say, a compliance review, WCAG compliance review, finding problems at that point is a lot more effort and time to remediate. And a lot of times that higher unexpected maybe costs could really sway an organization from addressing those types of issues. So I think of digital accessibility as not a one and done type of achievement. It's a process, where steps are taken throughout the workflow and along the way to ensure that there's this inclusion of all abilities. So, even if you think about it, if even one person is prevented from interacting with your digital experience, then it's really not accessible, right? And so it starts with designing with accessibility in mind. There are a number of different tools that you can use during the design process to help check against those types of standards, whether it's on color contrast or legibility. During the development process, it helps to have an internal set of standard web functional technical specifications that cover accessibility best practices that the team can use. There can be just standard specs for how to navigate web content if you're using a keyboard, how to use ARIA to improve experiences for users that are on different assistive technologies, right, such as the screen reader. And then there's the QA process, the testing process, where specific tests can be introduced to check for how your website is performing against accessibility standards. So it's bringing the whole team, on board, educating and then incorporating those checkpoints along the way.
Perfect. Thank you, Joann. And Abhik, related to that, how can designers and developers keep up with the evolving accessibility standards and guidelines that are so critical?
Interesting. Like, I think it's not a problem only to restricted to how do you keep up with accessibility standards and guidelines. I think all of us have this thing that there is so much happening in this world of technology. We have to keep up on various fronts. And we just need to bring the awareness that this is also one of the fronts you have to be aware of and see what's happening in terms of standards, what's happening in terms of recommendations and guidelines which are coming out in this. Because it's not that most designers do not know this. It is just that it has got deprioritized from their list of so many things they have to keep up with. Now, if we are able to bring all of these things together in a way that it becomes a part of your day-to-day life, it's probably easier. So for example, let's say if you have a workplace where you do see certain people who have different kinds of abilities or disabilities, who you see on a regular basis in meetings or when you go to get your coffee and things like that, it remains in your mind that, oh, there is this person, Abhik, who is on a wheelchair. How will that person use this gadget which I have created, or something like that? Now, a lot of it is to do with bringing that awareness and bringing it into probably their personal sphere. A lot of times there are people who have friends, neighbors, relatives who have some of these disabilities. They perceive the whole problem very differently from somebody who has never seen a person with a disability. I recently, actually not so recently, but I met a team of very brilliant engineers from one of the top universities who had come up with this really interesting product, which is like a ring for a person. It can read the menu for you. And oh, that was, I mean, it sounded great. They had spent a lot of money and time and energy on building this. And when we were talking, I basically got to a point where I asked them, have you actually tried this with blind people? So that engineer told me that, no, I've actually never interacted with a blind person in my life. So this actually happened to be an accessibility related event. So I took him to another person there and I introduced them. And this person is 100% blind, not just legally blind, is 100% blind. And I said, okay, this guy has a product he thinks can help you. Why don't you guys talk about it? And they eventually realized that the assumption was that you actually know how your menu is oriented, whether it is straight up or not. And there was no way a blind person who cannot see anything at all knows whether it is sideways or upside down or whatever. And so the whole challenge of having the menu read out to you is now in a totally different dimension. I mean, yes, it was a good thought, but now I have to try it out in 4 or 5 different ways before I am able to make this tool really help me. So basically, I mean, to keep it short, the whole thing was that if the person had perceived it a little deeper because of personal experiences or having an exposure to the kind of problems these people face, they might have thought of it slightly differently. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it is to do with our personal intents and desires and what we want to keep on top of our priority list. And there are way too many things happening in technology today. Like, I mean, people today are designing for immersive environments like the metaverse. Now, what happens with the metaverse? Is it good for a person with disability or is it bad? Now, I believe that there is a lot of good which can happen in the metaverse for a person with disability, because they can create an avatar of themselves who doesn't have any disability, and they can do things in that virtual world which they cannot physically do for themselves, which is a huge boost for their psychological well-being. But on the other side, do these tools really allow them to do that for all kinds of disabilities? That is something which has to be seen. So yes, there is always a gap between what we want to know or what we should know and what we have time for. So somewhere we have to prioritize this higher than anything else. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have these webinars and conversations multiple times a year about accessibility, so that we are able to keep it on top of the mind for people.
Sure. Thank you, Abhik. Good stuff. Joann, anything that you might want to add on to that point?
No, I think it's, we've said it a few times. There's really a lot of, there are social and economic benefits to designing for accessibility, and really improving upon these digital experiences, for everyone, and all boats rise in the end.
Absolutely. That's well stated. So we have been hearing a lot in the media and in the news just recently around artificial intelligence. And I'm probably going to be putting you guys on the spot with this question. So no pressure, or maybe a little bit of pressure, but how is AI, which again is artificial intelligence, of course, how is it coming into play with digital accessibility? And I put that question to both of you, and if either of you have some thoughts on it, please jump in.
Sure, I could speak from the testing side. So when we think about testing websites and digital experiences for, let's say, compliance with WCAG standards or accessibility, there are a number of different scanning tools, right, that we can use. There's also testing by, say, an accessibility expert who can do more of a manual or contextual analysis or evaluation of an experience. So I see AI coming a little more into play on the automated side with the scanning and the tools, and maybe there's some checks that can happen there where it reduces the need for people to find issues. But I don't see it completely replacing a lot of the manual testing and a lot of that more contextual evaluation that an expert may do. And also in the next iteration of WCAG in the 3.0 version, there are going to be some requirements around having disabled users conduct testing to ensure full compliance with the standards. So there's definitely some activity in the AI space. I know Microsoft also started an initiative, AI for accessibility projects, and they're conducting, they're conducting research and investing in AI tools, particularly on the learning and development side, like assistive technologies. So it's still early on, but gaining some traction.
I love it. Excellent. Abhik, on that topic of artificial intelligence, any thoughts?
Yeah, this probably also develops from your earlier question around data. So the more data we have, the more information we have to actually model these artificial intelligence tools. So if we can probably make things easier for people to use by not having, let's say, 10 items placed in front of them, but which of those 10 items they want to look at next. So rather than going with our traditional approach of having a menu of everything up there, is there a way we can go predictive based on what you know of that person or what you know of their interaction with your website so far? So this person is only interested in the toys section of your website. Do you want to really show them ads about clothes? You probably want to just focus on the toys piece because that's what that person has probably come to look at. But then again, it's a decision which we have to take on how much it constrains a person, because there are people who are just browsing for anything. It just so happened that they started with toys. So there are interesting problems around how this is going to make life easier, or will it make it difficult for you to actually find things? But I think another side of it is the more AI we use, the more difficult we make it to test. I mean, this is AI not for testing, but AI in the product. And then it has to have all those different personas who are using the product enough to be actually able to test it. Like Joann was mentioning, having people with those disabilities actually test the product. Now, there are, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 different types of those personas which we could create. Now, how many of those would it be feasible to test our product with? So that is something which is something the industry has to grapple with. Today, accessibility, if you really look at it, is majorly focused on visual cues. So we spend a lot of time thinking about visual, but let's assume you have a Google Home or Alexa device. Now, what happens to accessibility for that? How do you think about it? How does WCAG actually apply there? It's an entirely different kind of media which does not have visual. So I think there is a lot of changes which is going to happen with these forthcoming versions of the standard as we start moving away from the traditional web into other ways of interacting with technology. And I think that's what keeps the life of technologists exciting for in the years to come, because the more things we change, the more problems we have to try to solve. So hopefully it'll be good for everyone.
Indeed, and it is all very, very exciting what's going on right now around these topics of accessibility in digital. So both of you have just recently mentioned testing in your responses, and I have one more question for you today before we wrap things up. And along the lines of testing, the question is, what are some effective strategies for testing the accessibility of a website? So what are some of the effective strategies for testing the accessibility of a website? And how can we ensure that these tests are thorough and effective? Joann, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach that, right? And so part of it is having accessibility part of your process and workflow so that it's not just a checkpoint at the end. It's similar to how you infuse quality, right? Throughout a process, that there are a lot of different ways, and it starts from the beginning all the way through to the end. There isn't just testing at the end to see how we did. So the more that we introduce designing for accessibility, developing for accessibility, the testing process, right, becomes just that much more effective. When it comes to different types of tests, so there's a number of different tools, scanning tools that can be used at different points along the way. That in collaboration with a more qualitative evaluation, so actually a person conducting these tests, and ideally an accessibility expert. But there are a lot of different guidelines by the WCAG, checklists, tips and tricks that you can also follow to help you to evaluate how your product is performing when it comes to different abilities. So I think it's really a combination of different things to really ensure that you have an experience that is as accessible and available to people of all different needs.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Joann. Abhik, on this topic of effective strategies for testing, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Joann covered almost everything, and we have probably talked about most of the things, but yeah, this combination of certain things which are repetitive things to look for. Sometimes automated tools do a better job because there is no fatigue. But there are these angles which an automated tool cannot pick up, for which you do need human testers. And the mix of having people with different kinds of abilities in that test team becomes quite important, especially in the space of accessibility. So if we are able to bring more people with disabilities into technology, and specifically into these groups who are testing products, so either as a part of the user groups we work with when we design products, or as a part of the test teams, it is really valuable. And one of the things which probably would be a good beginning is, normally when you look at accessibility and things like that, they when a product is specified or when a project is specified, they say, oh, there are these non-functional requirements, and it falls into that bucket. And people are not really spending too much thought in defining what accessibility aspects are required in a particular product. So I would encourage product managers and people defining requirements to spend a little bit more time in actually defining what you want the product to do from an aspect of accessibility, rather than leaving it in that bucket of non-functional and hoping that every designer and every developer and every tester is thinking about this. So can we make some of these requirements more explicit upfront? This probably goes with Joann's thing of having accessibility happen earlier in the process. So can we also have it happening when people are thinking about a product? So it becomes so much easier for all the people in the following steps to just take the cue from there and go on, rather than trying to imagine what could be good features to add.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Abhik. I think we should leave it there for today. I want to thank you both, Joann and Abhik, for participating in this very important conversation today around, around ADA, around inclusivity in the world of, digital accessibility. This is a very, very important topic, and we've covered a lot of ground today, and I personally found it educational and fascinating, and appreciate all of your contributions and insights. And I also want to say thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us for our panel discussion today, and let's do it again soon. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.